Welcome to Life's Dirty Little Secrets. I'm Emma Waddington.
And I'm Chris McCurry. And today we are absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Jill Stoddard. Jill is a clinical psychologist, TEDx speaker, 3-time book author, and the host of Psychologist Off the Clock, which, for those of you who don't know, is the #1 clinical psychology podcast in the world, if not the universe. Her books include Big Book of Act Metaphors, Be Mighty, and Imposter No More. They've been translated into more than a dozen languages. She was in Newburyport, Massachusetts with her husband, 2 kids, and a disobedient French bulldog. Jill's work centers on a radical idea. The psychological discomfort isn't a sign something's gone wrong, but it's a sign that you're right where you're meant to be, at the intersection of caring and challenge. Almost 5 years ago, Jill had gastric bypass surgery. She lost 90 pounds. She has kept that weight off, which the data tell us is the hardest part. She's accomplished that using the same psychological flexibility tools that she teaches her clients. So this conversation is about weight, but more than that. It's a conversation about what it means to ask for help with your body, or any problem for that matter, in a culture that treats asking for help as cheating or a sign of weakness or dependence. Jill, welcome to Life's Dirty Little Secrets.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Emma. Thanks for having me. It's so nice to be back with you two.
It's a pleasure. So, we've been told our whole lives that asking for help is the easy way out. And you didn't shrink from that. You asked for help. You got the help, and it was very successful for you. So can you tell us about coming to terms with that? Did you struggle with that at all? Or was it a fairly easy decision to, get the treatment that you thought would be helpful to you?
Once I discovered that it was appropriate for me, it was fairly easy. So I grew up with parents who called me Tubby, Little Tubbette, Tubby 2x4, who couldn't fit through the kitchen door. So no surprise, I went on to develop, a lifetime of food and body image issues. And I remember, sneaking food when my parents weren't home, because if I ate in front of them, they would sort of shame me. They would say, Tubby, if I was eating a snack. And so I wouldn't eat in front of them. And, it just led to really unhealthy eating behaviors. And I did the typical, yo-yo dieting my whole entire life. I would lose weight and then gain it all back and then some, and then lose weight and gain it all back and then some. And I was working with a client, not on anything related to weight loss. He was depressed and anxious. And he had gone to a medical doctor and was very upset because that doctor suggested he should get gastric bypass surgery. And as the therapy session, he was just kind of venting about how it offended him that the doctor said this. But I sort of tuned out for a second. I'll admit I did. I came right back. But for a second, because I thought, you're not fat enough to have gastric bypass surgery. That doesn't make any sense. And in that next beat, I thought, oh my gosh, like if he's an appropriate candidate for this surgery, maybe I am too, because I always thought it was something that only like very, very morbidly obese people did. So I just started doing a deep dive. I read, I think, 3 books in 3 weeks, looked up research articles, just got as much information as I possibly could. And once I was educated, it actually wasn't that difficult to make the decision. It really did feel like it was finally the right thing for me, since dieting really doesn't work. Of course, weight loss surgery, people still gain weight back from weight loss surgery too. It's much more successful than traditional dieting, but you can still gain the weight back. And so I knew that I was going to have a lot of work to do to be able to maintain the weight loss. But it wasn't a super hard decision to try to decide to do it. It only became a little challenging sort of after the fact, when I realized that people had this attitude that, oh, you're taking the easy way out. It's a crutch. It's cheating to have this weight loss surgery. And of course, since then, in the last 5 years, the weight loss medications have become very, very popular. And I know many people who keep it a secret for the same reason. They feel like there's this stigma that it's cheating, or they'll admit it. But even I've had people say self-deprecating things to me. Oh, I'm taking this medication and I feel bad about it. I should be able to do this without help. I mean, it's a weird and fascinating phenomenon.
as I was listening to you, I was just feeling that shame, right? That you describe about not being able to do it alone. What is that about with weight, that it's cheating? Because I think, as you said, the diet culture really doesn't work. And that, there's a lot of rebound weight. You were saying, in one of the conversations I heard, when we diet, we lose the weight, but then we regain it plus some. So it's like a horrible cycle. And I imagine you experienced that, probably, like you said, a lifetime of it, of this rebound effect. And it's must be so demoralizing, like there's something inherently wrong with you.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the word. Demoralizing was right there at the top of mind, because I think it is this area where people create it as this personal and moral failing, that if your body doesn't fit a certain mold, there's something you're doing wrong, or you should just have willpower. And we don't really apply that to anything else, like, I don't know, if you break a bone and you need a cast, nobody's saying that's the easy way out. You should just grin and bear it and let the bone heal in a wonky way. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many other things. Or, we were talking before we hit record. Well, isn't using a dishwasher or driving a car, like, isn't that also technically cheating or the easy way out? But there's no glory in walking 10 miles instead of driving. That would just be incredibly inefficient and kind of dumb. Right? Like, we use technology and tools all the time to make our lives easier, more efficient, to get our time back. So I would much rather spend time with my kids than doing dishes by hand. And nobody seems to think I'm a moral failure because I'm not doing my dishes by hand. But if you use a tool for weight loss, I mean, really, it's all steeped in patriarchy, right? It's like, because this mostly affects women, and women are expected, your bodies are supposed to look a certain way, but you're only supposed to get your body that way in a very, only by eating less and having self-control and having willpower. And it doesn't count if you do it any other way. And then, I even think the body positivity movement is very well intentioned. And I would love nothing more than for everyone on the planet to just love their bodies exactly as they are. But the reality is, we still live in a culture that says you're not allowed to have a body that's a certain size or shape. So we're still swimming in these waters that say you have to be small, and wrinkle free and have long hair and all the other things about appearance. And so then with body positivity, I'm supposed to just love my body. And like, if I'm a good feminist, then I'm going to love my body, except I still live in a culture that tells me my body isn't right and it's not small enough and I should make it smaller. So now the fact that I can't love my body because I swim in those waters makes me a bad feminist. So now I'm just going to shut up about it and suffer in silence. It's like, you kind of can't win. Do you know what I mean?
100%. So true. So that piece, that stuckness, that the truth is that we still live in this world that tells us we need to look a certain way, especially as women. I think it applies more and more to men. Hence, we're seeing more and more sort of young men with eating disorders. It's like, I think about sort of boys and men are inheriting all the worst parts of women. Like, there's more anxiety in men. There's, suicide is going up. And so the world is getting harder for them too. But it's true that women, we do have certain stereotypes about being agreeable, being super smart. At the moment, we've got to sort of, break all the records with, how intelligent we are. But we also need to be beautiful and look a certain way. Part of these messages, I agree, is adding to this, in a way, is shame. It goes both ways. You feel shame if you don't look a certain way, and you feel shame if you care about looking a certain way.
Exactly. Well put. That was a much more succinct way to say that. And that's exactly right. And, there's even this, I don't know if it's research or just people who observed these trends, but that over the course of history, whenever women have started to come into power, that is when culturally skinny comes back in vogue. Like, if you look at, when Twiggy became popular and Kate Moss became popular, it's always like right on the heels of, women's liberation and sexual liberation and women getting the right to vote. And I'm blanking on the name of the book right now, but there are pieces that have been written about this that sort of track that change in history, because if we're focusing on trying to be smaller, then we're not focusing on conquering the world.
I was having a conversation, slight detour from this, but this idea that women are being sort of held back by different stereotypes and expectations. I mean, obviously we have this sort of female hysteria once upon a time. And I was in a conversation recently with somebody who was saying that this sort of advent of, women getting more of a diagnosis in ADHD, isn't that, again, telling women that they can't be exceptional and that women can't be incredibly smart? Is that putting women back in another box? The reality is that as women, we have a fight ahead of us still, and we have to keep questioning the stereotypes that, a lot of us carry and a lot of us apply to ourselves too. So coming back to the weight piece for you, like, how do you make peace with those two parts, those two stereotypes within yourself, right? We don't want to necessarily need to look a certain way, but it also is something that perhaps is important because it allows you to do a lot of the things that you like doing, like you mentioned in one of the conversations around exercise. That's a true, a value of yours. And I remember one of the earlier podcasts, I remember it as I was listening to you talking to Emily on Psychologist Off the Clock. I remember a podcast during COVID where you talked about hating the treadmill. Did you have a treadmill in your garage?
Yes, I did actually.
I remember.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's so
I
funny.
remember you saying, God, I hate this, but I know I have to do this. And it sort of gave me this flashback of, you talking about, I have to do this. Like, this is supposed to be good for me, but I hate it. And then you've mentioned how, weight was part of why that was so hard for you. So there are so many more parts than aesthetic and vanity.
Oh, absolutely. And that was a huge part of it was, even though my cholesterol was high, but I didn't otherwise have a lot of health problems, but my cholesterol didn't used to be high. And then all of a sudden it was high. And I could just sort of see this trajectory that I was on, that, type 2 diabetes was probably around the corner. And of course, you can live in a larger body and still be healthy. But I just knew I wasn't on, that wasn't me. I think I was on a not so healthy trajectory. And when I had the surgery, within 1 month, my cholesterol was normal. For 5 years, my labs have been perfect. Everything has just been great. I feel great. And for me lately, it's been more about not wanting to be an old lady. I want to have strong muscles that will support my bones so that I don't, break a hip. And it used to be hard for me to just walk up the stairs, or when my kids were little, to like try to pick them up and hold them, because it is harder to do things when you're carrying a lot more weight around. And now I exercise, 4 or 5 times a week, and I love it. And I'm strong. Like, I love how strong I am. My husband, he's not a guy that will blow smoke. He will tell you like it is. And one day I was like getting dressed and I looked in the mirror and I said, honey bunny, am I crazy? Or do I have like a little bit of a six pack? And he looked and he would laugh in my face if I was imagining that. And he said, no, you totally do. I can totally see it. And, for someone who grew up being called tubby her whole life, struggling to get on a treadmill, hating exercise, to, love exercise now because it's not torture. And I have a lot of compassion for my former self because I was really hard on that me. Why are you so lazy? Why can't you just get yourself to work out? And now in hindsight, of course, it was torture. It was so difficult. Like, of course I couldn't sustain it. It was so painful. And now it's not painful. It's easy. It's fun. But it's a totally different experience doing it with and without 90 pounds.
I was just remembering that those Peloton commercials that got so much blowback from society. Do you recall those just a few years ago, where the woman gets a Peloton bike for, it's her birthday or Christmas or something, and she's working out on it. She looks, not real happy doing it. And boy, Peloton got huge backlash for that. This woman is a slave to societal expectations.
Right.
Some of us just find exercise. It's not just a matter of how difficult it is. It's boring.
Right.
But, if we can push past some of that stuff, I think that this is where values come in.
Absolutely.
And we can talk about appetitive, behaviors. And I know you talk about values and how it's related to, your journey as well as the work that you do with your clients who have similar issues.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, that was one of the things that made me realize how important it is to really be clear on your values, because what the conversation, Emma, that you might be remembering about the treadmill is, for years and years, I kept trying to connect that to my values. And it was like health, health, health. And it just wasn't really clicking. I just couldn't get myself there. And then I had this like aha moment one day, because my husband is one of those very lucky people who doesn't have to do anything and he looks great. He's got, like good genes he's muscular without having to work at it, but he doesn't exercise. And I thought, oh my gosh, like my kids cannot grow up with two sedentary parents. They have to have someone who models that like moving your body is a regular part of life. And so once I connected exercise to my values around motherhood and modeling to my children, being a positive role model to them, that's when it clicked. And that's when I was better able to start consistently working out. But that was prior to the weight loss, and I still hated it and it was torture. But I did it because I had it connected to my values. Now it remains connected to my values, but I've already modeled all this to my kids for many, many years. Now it's really about health and not being an old lady and being around for a long time. And our house has lots of floors. So I'm like, I got a lot of stairs that I'm going to have to be able to walk up and down for a really long time. So I better make sure I stay strong and active. And so, I think it's an example where sometimes your values, the values you prioritize, might change a little bit over time as your life changes. And that like consistently re-clarifying your values, I think, is an important way to kind of stay on track with whatever it is that you're doing in your life that matters.
I was thinking, the piece around, I wanted to come back to those stereotypes, because I do think that I struggle internally with it too. Like the wanting to move our body feels like a good value. Like everybody would go, yeah, we'll follow that one. Or, wanting to teach your kids that it's good to move your body. That's, absolutely. But what about wanting to look a certain way? That's obviously not a value. It's a goal. But I do think that as women, we're still swimming in that soup where we have to look a certain way. But what makes that okay? Like, is it okay for us to still want to look a certain way and want to dress up and want to wear makeup? There's something about in this conversation around this that feels really important to unpack too. Like as women.
Well, I think like if I had a client that I was working on that exact question with, it would be, well, what is it in the service of? Is your appearance in the service? Is there some value around taking pride in appearance, caring what you look like, just wanting to like dress to the nines and feel good about yourself? Or are you running away from something? Are you only doing this because of fear of judgment from other people, because society says you should, right? Values are meant to be personal and freely chosen, not dictated by culture, society, your parents who call you tubby, or anything else. They're personal and freely chosen. And so, I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with caring about your appearance if it's values oriented. But I do think we should be really aware of when it's not. And, I think for me with the surgery, if I'm being totally honest, part of it genuinely was health related. And the other part of it was living in a society where I hated my body and hated myself. Like I just really struggled with my appearance. It also affected my love life, right? It's like hard to be intimate when you're not feeling confident. And so for me, it partly was appearance, and it probably was maybe more avoidance than values at that time. And I wish that hadn't been the case. Like I wish I could have been someone who just said, I'm not going to cave to that pressure. I'm going to love myself exactly how I am. And I couldn't.
Wow. That's so brave and honest. Thank you. I think that's super important for the audience to hear, because I think there is something, really judgmental about caring about your appearance. Like that's not allowed.
Right.
And it's unfair.
But you're judged if you don't.
Yeah, that's right.
If you don't wear your makeup and curl your hair or whatever, you get judged. Or don't Botox your forehead, you get judged for that. but you
Yeah.
get judged if you do because, again, you're cheating and you shouldn't care about your
Yeah.
parents. I mean, it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? The porridge is either too hot or too cold. We're never just right. We're never
We're
just
never
right.
just right. We're
But
never
I do
just
think
right.
that's where values can really play a role. It's like, if we're never just right, then we can let go of what they, quote unquote, say we should or shouldn't do and really just try to get clear on what matters to us, because no matter what, somebody's going to have an opinion about it.
100%.
Right.
I've been thinking about this more and more lately because I have a 9-year-old daughter, but I love dressing up and I always have done. And with age, I think I'm becoming one of those. I remember being a little person and looking at these older women that was like dressed up to the T. And I just think, gosh, do you just like lose your sense of self as you get older, wearing the craziest colors and the sort of biggest lips and, and I'm kind of understanding that I can see it happening with me. I'm probably going to be one of those crazy women, wearing the big hats, to tea. But there's something.
You do have your leopard print high top Converse sneakers.
I love them. You see,
Nice.
It's happening already. Yeah,
I think
happening
it's
already.
the opposite of losing yourself, though. Like,
Yeah,
I
maybe.
mean, I feel
Yeah.
like I just turned 53, a week ago, and I feel like the minute I turned 50, I just had can I swear on this podcast? Zero
Of course.
F's to give.
Yeah,
It was like I turned this corner and was like, I know myself. I like myself. I'm just going to do what I want and be who I want and not give a shit what anybody else thinks anymore. Like, there's something. Menopause is rough, but that is the one thing that comes with menopause that I think is a wonderful, amazing gift. And I think those women you're talking about, that's probably what it was. Not losing self, more gaining a sense of self. Like, I'm going to wear my big hats and my big lips, and I don't care what you think.
Well, we are going to draw the line at Mar-a-Lago face.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's a whole different ballgame.
And that's, those values are, I don't know. I don't know.
Yes.
But, it is true. It's happening in the men's side too. I mean, there's this whole new thing, Looksmaxing.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God.
That the young men are doing, where they're
that?
actually hitting themselves in the face with hammers to change their bone structure. And
Whoa.
oh, yeah. It's called bone
It's
bashing.
these weird influencers on YouTube doing these crazy things that the kids are watching. Yeah.
To try to
It's
create the
disturbing.
perfect male, appearance, and it's pretty twisted.
That does sound pretty twisted. But, we did have women removing ribs at one point.
Right.
So I guess, welcome to the club.
Yeah.
To the men.
Foot binding.
Foot binding.
Foot binding. Yeah, corsets. The joys.
You name it.
Yeah. I think
I went to a women's empowerment conference, and the very first offering, the talk, was 3 women who worked in the med spa beauty industry, talking all about weight loss and de-wrinkling and being younger. And listen, I had weight loss surgery. I do some of those things. But at the same time, I was like, this is a women's empowerment conference. Like, why are you telling me to shrink my body and get rid of my wrinkles? Like, that is the opposite of women's empowerment.
Yeah, I earned those.
I mean, so that made me very sad that okay, now this stuff is even infiltrating these women's spaces, that really the messaging should be, how are you going to go live big and bold and have this big successful, business? It was a women's business conference, not let's focus on your body and your skin and your youth, because doesn't that really tend to get in the way of focusing on those other things? It's tough. It's a tricky space.
It is tough. And there is a sweet spot. I mean, thinking about, that permission to be, that perhaps we feel more sort of emboldened to do as we get older as women, with sort of less, I don't know, swimming in less of that soup. But that permission to be sometimes does include, dressing a way that feels good because we like it, as opposed to because we're being told to. That's what I think about with my daughter. It's who's telling you? No, my daughter doesn't have any of this yet. She does what she wants mostly. But eventually it'll be, who's telling you this? Who is this for? Is this because you want to? Does this feel good inside of you? Or is this because you want somebody else to think you look good? And I think, it's messy. There's a bit of both inside,
Mm-hmm.
when we choose to look or do something, it's messy. It's not a clear-cut message, but we have to keep asking ourselves that to make sure that it is aligned with the human we want to be.
Right.
Jill, what are some of the warning signs or the red flags that suggest that, because we have to navigate this journey and we have all these influences and, the stuff in our heads, as in accept loss and commitment therapy, we might say the passengers on the bus are telling us all kinds of things and they don't get off the bus. We're going to have to live with them. What are some of the signs that you see that suggest that people are kind of moving into a little more the toxicity range, or how do we navigate this? What are some ways of
You
that we
mean
can...
like, how do we know if it's more of like a move toward or a move away, like specific to appearance and weight and those kinds of things?
Yeah. And you might want to explain toward and away for our listeners who aren't familiar with the matrix, but
Yeah, I mean, toward in a way that is, kind of going back to that question, like, what is this in the service of? Is this choice you're making to look a certain way or not look a certain way or do a certain intervention or not? Is that moving you in the direction of being the me you want to be, living the life that you want, living your values? Or is it moving away from that because really it's more about avoiding a feeling you don't want to feel or, being driven by your thoughts and feelings in ways that aren't values consistent? And, that's a good question, Chris. I don't know that I have a real specific answer in terms of red flags because I think so. With the people that I work with who have gone through weight loss and come to see me for help with long-term success, maintenance success, because obviously that's the hard part. My soapbox with weight and appearance is I think we will have arrived in a better place when we all just leave each other alone, right? Like if you tell me I'm a bigger person and I'm perfectly okay with that, I'm going to say, awesome, that's great, good for you. But if you say I'm a bigger person and I'm not okay with it and I want to be a smaller person, I'm going to say, great, good for you, I support you. And if you say I'm going to do it, I'm just going to try to do it with willpower, I'm going to say, great, good for you. If you say, I want to do it with weight loss surgery, or I want to do it with Ozempic or Mounjaro or whatever, I'm going to say, great, good for you. Like, I don't know that I explore values in a way of like, should you be doing this? Is it values driven? Because I more want to be in a space of like, if you're making this decision, whatever that decision is, I'm here for it because you are a grown ass woman or man. And I'm just going to trust that like you can make the right decision for your body and your life. And I'm just here to help you do whatever that is successfully. Because I think we just judge way too much. And I don't want to judge.
well, but are you listening for hints that these may not be freely chosen?
I mean, certainly listening for, but I think like we were talking about before, it's such a tricky space. I think most of the time it's a both and thing. And it was for me, right? Like it was values driven and it was also trying to run away from a lifetime of little tubette and shame and feeling bad about myself and my body. So it was personal and freely chosen. And it was also running away from a lot of pain and discomfort. So I think it's one of those spaces that often tends to be little from column A, little from column B. Like it can be a move toward and a move away almost, like at the same time.
Exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
that can be okay. As long as the values are also there and it's not only avoidance. I think that's okay.
Good. Thank you.
It's so refreshing, I think, to hear this. I mean, obviously, some of us, I don't work with eating disorders, but that's always in the sort of, backdrop to anything weight related. A certain group, a group of mostly women, but more and more men, start to restrict too much, or, they might fall into the sort of bulimic where they're restricting, purging, or over-exercising, and life gets really, really small.
Yeah.
And tight, and there's not a lot of values in their life, and it's much more goal-oriented. I think that's what, obviously, whenever there's a weight loss conversation, that is the concern, that it's going to, restriction is going to kick in, and that's going to get them into a life that really isn't worth living, because we know that anorexia is one of the deadliest mental health disorders. But Yeah, how do you speak to that? Because that is obviously a big concern for many parents and many clinicians and
Yeah.
physicians, and perhaps that's where some of the conversations get really uncomfortable for doctors.
Well, like you, I also don't work with eating disorders. So that is like way outside of my ambit. So if it is, significant restriction over exercise, binge purge, that's something I refer out. So with me, like the people that I'm working with who have had surgery certainly may have a history of binge eating, like disorder. I think most of the people I've worked with have a history of some disordered eating, but not a diagnosable eating disorder that is getting them into more of like a danger zone like that. So it hasn't been something that I've had to address really personally. I will say one of the things that I do the most that might be kind of surprising that I think, again, I'm not an eating disorder therapist, so I'm not sure, but it's my understanding that like when you work with eating disorders, there's sort of this like scales are evil, scales are bad, throw your scale away, never weigh yourself. However, when you're working with people who have a long history of being overweight or obese, the research shows the opposite is true. So I'll give you just anecdotally an example for myself. It's like I never used to weigh myself because I was told scales are bad, you shouldn't weigh yourself. But then I wouldn't even know that I had gained weight till my pants didn't fit anymore and I had gained 15 pounds. And so that yo-yo dieting, lose weight and then gain it back, part of the reason that weight gain, regain happened is because I was never weighing myself. And a scale, it's just data. It's literally a measure of gravity. And we have, many of us have a really weird and like almost pathological relationship to our scales. And so part of the work, a big part of the work I do with folks who are trying to maintain weight loss is change their relationship to their scale. This is just a data point. And I actually want you to weigh yourself every day or every other day because it is a data point. And so if that number is going too low, well, then you need to do something. You need to eat more or you need to exercise less. If that number is creeping up past where you want your sort of like comfortable, healthy range to be, well, then you can look at what you've been doing over the last week that's causing that number to go up and you can adjust. And so it's like, and for me in the past 5 years, this has been the single most helpful thing that has finally kept me on track for the first time. And I mean, I don't know. My parents put me on my first diet when I was in like 4th grade. They offered to pay me $1 for every pound I lost. And if you look at pictures of me back then, I wasn't even really overweight. So you're talking 50 years of yo-yo dieting. And the scale has been the single most important thing that has really helped me to stay on track because it's a data point. But I had to change my relationship. And so when I work with clients and they stand on the scale and it's 2 pounds up and they go, right, and have that like instant panic, then we like practice changing our relationship to those feelings, to that number, so that it can be a tool that helps keep you on track. And it's not this like bad, evil thing. Now, of course, if you're talking about anorexia and an unhealthy relationship and restriction, it's a totally different story. But like for the people that I work with, it's been a game changer for them. And every single one of them has the same story as me. They avoided the scale. They were taught the scale is evil. They were taught they should throw the scale away. And then with me, they changed the relationship to the scale. And now if the scale is a helpful tool and that's it. And it doesn't mean anything. It's not a moral, judgment when the scale says a certain number. It's just a data point.
Yeah, that moral judgment, right? The shame that comes in and that sort of cascade of other behaviors that come with the shame, the hiding, and potentially the, behaving in ways that are not aligned with our values. We don't look after ourselves very well in those moments when we're feeling deeply ashamed about ourselves.
And isn't it silly that we would feel shame because a number on a digital device pops up, right? So it's like that's a lot of what I do is like, essentially combating that shame, like changing the meaning, I guess,
Yes.
of what that number means.
What else do you do? I guess what's interesting is this, you're absolutely right. The maintenance piece seems to be the most challenging piece around, weight loss and in this day and age, I think about, the accessibility of food is a huge problem. Like there's food absolutely everywhere. I was talking to somebody about it the other day that when I was growing up, I can't even remember if we got snacks at school. I think we may have had one, but my kids get, they get 2 snacks in addition to, if not 3, in addition to lunch. Like there's a lot of food and they're expected to be eating every few hours. And there's vending machines at school and, food is really everywhere. So it's really hard to manage your food intake nowadays.
Right. Well, like if you're going to quit drinking, you can quit cold turkey, but you can't quit eating.
That's
so
right.
if food is a trigger for you and something that you're using to try to self-soothe or to fix your boredom or your anxiety or whatever, you can't just quit cold turkey. You got to eat to live. So I think it does make it a challenge. And that, like, one of the exercises I do is I have people choose a food, or we'll do it more than once. Like if you have food that you just don't let in your house because you're scared of it, because you don't trust yourself that you're going to binge or overeat on it, we bring it to session and practice like mindful willingness, smelling it, looking at it, essentially changing the relationship to the feelings that the food triggers, to the food itself, practicing kind of interacting with it in a different way, doing some like basically distress tolerance, I guess you would call it, around craving, making or willingness, like making space for craving. I also learned from Kelly Wilson many, many years ago. So, Kelly Wilson being one of the big ACT guys, he was doing this training. It was not about substance use, but for some reason he brought this up, and it was the role that intolerance of uncertainty plays in relapse of substances. And the way he talked about it is if you give up your substance of choice, you're now sitting in a constant state of will I, won't I, will I, won't I, meaning will I pick back up or not? Am I going to stay sober or am I going to drink? Will I, won't I, will I, won't I, will I, won't I, will I, won't I? And as long as you're staying sober, there's always this possibility that you might drink again. So what's the only way to quiet that voice and resolve that uncertainty? To drink. So it's not just about cravings, right? Like I think I always oversimplified it and thought like, oh, you just have this craving and it's so unbearable, you give in and drink. But it's also this uncertainty. And that is a really hard thing for human beings to sit with. And so if you drink, it takes all that away. But now you're starting from scratch again and you're right back in, will I, won't I, will I, won't I? And so that's something that I work with people on in terms of like the food, whether if it's a piece of cake or a 4th piece of pizza or whatever the case may be. And so the key there being practicing willingness specifically toward the uncertainty that like, I don't know and I don't need to know. And that's okay. Uncertainty is safe. Feelings of doubt are just sensations. It's not an emergency, that kind of thing.
When my mother quit smoking cigarettes, and we're talking over 60 years ago, what she did, and this defines my mother so well, she took a pack of cigarettes and she put it on the shelf and she quit smoking. And she told herself, if I ever want to start it up again, they're right there. And she didn't. But if she just if they're there, if I want to. But she knew that if they weren't there, she'd be thinking about it
all the time, right?
Yeah. And that was my mother.
I love that.
That's a great example. And you were saying this and I was thinking, gosh, that's anxiety all over though, isn't it? So, you have people who are terrified of, I don't know, the plane is going to crash or, they're going to make a fool of themselves. And so am I going to stay or am I going to go? Am I going to take this plane or aren't I going to take this plane? And so they make decisions. They go, well, I'm not going to take the plane. And so then there's no uncertainty, or I'm just going to leave this party. So then there's no uncertainty. I guess it's like, I'd never thought of it in that way when it came to, anxiety as well. Like this intolerance of uncertainty is, such an important muscle.
Huge. Yeah.
We quote you so much, Jill, on this podcast, this getting comfortable, feeling uncomfortable. I think I must say it every other conversation we have. It just feels like such an important muscle. And it sounds like that's part of this conversation too.
Yes, like did I tell you guys a story? Stop me if I already told you this. I love it. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. I got
that from Lisa Coyne.
Oh, I need it. I love it. Actually, speaking of Lisa Coyne, so Lisa and I both give a talk at this same event with this amazing group called Kyle Cares. And so basically the organizer reached out to me and asked me to do this talk. It's for kids in high school, like juniors and seniors in high school. And he said, I want you to teach them something that is actionable, that they can take home with them, that will improve their mental health and reduce their vulnerability to suicide. And you have 25 minutes. And I like burst out laughing. I was like, oh, okay, easy. Let me get right on that. But then like right after that, I was like, oh no, actually that is easy. I know exactly what I'll do. And it's teaching them to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because like, think of how many decisions we make because we don't want to feel a certain thing, and how many opportunities would open or hard conversations we would have. And one of my favorite exercises I did with them, well, the first time I did it, I tried to have them look at their phones and not do anything, like see all the notifications and not open their apps. And it completely failed. They could not do it. And so I was like, all right, it was like the thing that's at the top of the hierarchy instead of starting with something that was a little less challenging. So that was a learning lesson. But the one that I did that was awesome, and it wasn't my idea, someone else gave me the idea, is I cut little squares of bubble wrap and I handed it out to all the kids. And the talk was on like impulsivity, like when you send off that text message in anger and then you regret it because you just ruined your relationship. And so I had them all put their thumbs on the bubble wrap and not pop it. And it was so good, you guys. Like they were all like, you're so mean, because it's hard. It is really hard to do that. And I was like, you can't cheat because I'll hear it. I'll know if you do it. And a couple kids did. They could not stop themselves. Yep. But for everybody else, we like sat and opened and made space and said, these are just sensations. This isn't dangerous. I can handle this. It's temporary. I'm safe. There's nothing I need to do. And just sort of changed our relationship to that urge and like, let it go. It was awesome. Yeah. They were cute.
I do the same thing with clients. I say, somewhere on their body, there's an itch right now. Don't scratch it. And notice that it'll increase in its intensity, and then it'll go away.
Breathe into it. Just notice. Yeah. And now I'm noticing the itches on my head and trying really hard not to scratch them.
Me on my knee.
Sorry.
Like everywhere. Thank you, Chris.
Well, just be mindful. Or not. Go ahead. So we come to the part of the podcast where I say, in the interest of time, final thoughts, any other secrets to maintenance, things that we want to impart to our listeners, if people are on the beginnings of this journey.
Well, I mean, I think this wouldn't be about maintenance. This would maybe be more about weight loss. But, one of the other things we often talk about in acceptance and commitment therapy is like non-attachment to outcome or outcome independence. Because when you're overly focused on, I need to be a certain weight or be a certain size, and then that's not happening as fast as you want it to happen, I think that puts people at risk for just kind of giving up and going back to old behaviors. But when you make it really more about the values and the steps and the actions and just showing up each day, doing things differently, and just sort of trust that like it'll happen down the road. And it's like, we know, like if you want to build your muscles and you go to the gym, you don't flex in the mirror after 1 hour and go, what the hell? Why aren't my muscles bigger? Like, this is a thing that's going to take time. But there's something that happens with like the weight loss and the scales. Like people get very impatient, and really focused on these like specific outcomes. And so I think, having a goal and wanting an outcome is fine, but kind of holding it lightly and really focusing on what are the steps you need to take to be effective. That's one thing that I like promote when people are in the weight loss phase. And then I guess I sort of turn that on its head when they're in the maintenance phase, because then it is about that data point that's on that scale.
So working the process.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, shall we end with something more about that permission piece? Because I know we've talked a lot about weight loss, but underneath it, there's the sense of giving people permission to do what feels right, even with, all the judgment that there is around it. And just be mindful, notice how it's working for you.
I think we could all stand to like look at our own biases. I mean, I will fully admit, like I see Ariana Grande and my very first thought is like, oh, honey, are you okay? Like think you need to eat. And then I'm immediately aware, like, oh, I'm just doing the same thing in the opposite direction, And I think all of us kind of, because we live in this culture, have this sort of default to look at a person's body or appearance and kind of immediately judge. And I would love for all of us to try to just be more aware of that and have, like I was saying before, my soapbox, have more of a like, you do you. And whatever I can do to support you, I am happy to do that. And, I hope that people will use these tools that we have available to us if that is something that they want to do, and not feel bad or guilty or shame about it, and also not feel like they have to do it, right? If you're like fine with your body shape and size, great, good for you. Don't cave, like you do you.
I like this. Thank you, Jill. This has
You're
been
welcome.
a fantastic conversation. And our listeners can listen to our first conversation with you on imposterism, which was fantastic, as of course your books are too. So thank you for your time and for your honesty and for bringing this conversation to our listeners. It's really important.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jill. This has been fabulous.
Bye, guys. Talk soon.